Inspiring billionaire discovers his father's hidden shield. What happens next will leave you amazed. Jake Mercer, a self-made billionaire from Texas, felt the oppressive heat of the summer afternoon seep into his bones as he climbed the wooden steps to his father's attic, now a tomb of memories. Dust motes danced in the air, illuminated by the shafts of light slicing through the slatted window. He had neglected this space, buried under years of grief and resentment for a father who had left him too soon, opting for war instead of family. He was all but ready to throw away the remnants of a man who never showed him how to bridge the chasm between success and love. But today felt different. Something compelled him to search. He pried open an old trunk, its rusted hinges groaning in protest. Inside lay a curious assortment. A beautifully engraved shield marked with the family crest, alongside letters, yellowed with age. The sight made his heart race, a tangible connection to a past he had always resented. Curiosity twisted in him, challenging his anger. Was this the life his father had fought for? As he carefully unfolded the delicate paper, the words leapt off the page, detailing harrowing tales of bravery and sacrifice. With each letter, Jake saw a man he barely knew, a hero, not just for the nation, but for the family left behind. Admiration surged through him, but entwined with it was a choking regret. What had he given in exchange for success? Was all the wealth and power worth the relationships sacrificed at the altar of ambition? His mind raced, bringing forth a familiar doubt. He had built an empire, but at what cost? Were all the sacrifices he made to scale the corporate ladder truly valid if they were based on a foundation of isolation? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Jake's fingers traced the engraved shield, a wave of purpose surged within him, a fierce desire to honor his father's legacy. Yet this mission felt daunting. His corporate empire thrived on a ruthless culture, profit prioritized over principles, and he was right in the thick of it. He had adopted the very mindset that had led to a lifetime of neglecting those like his father, the veterans who needed support, not indifference. Juggling this newfound moral responsibility with the demands of his powerful position became a minefield of tension. He watched as colleagues shrugged off veterans' requests for support, eyes glazed over with indifference. Each dismissive comment gnawed at him. Who was he becoming? The thrill of success felt hollow against the backdrop of his father's unacknowledged sacrifices. Tension grew, slithering around him like a noose. Jake knew confronting his own ethics was the path to a costly truth, one that could cost him more than money or power. His position could be on the line. But how could he remain silent? It became a question of integrity that would echo through the coming days. This battle with his own ambition pressed down heavily, flaring anxieties he had tucked away too long. In that attic, as he held the shield aloft, Jake wrestled with the fires of injustice igniting within him. The letters collapsed the distance between them. They were not just pages, but a call to action. How deep did his father's sacrifices run, and what cost would it take to reshape his own legacy? The air felt charged as he stood at the edge of a personal revolution. This was just the beginning, and the stakes were higher than he ever imagined, leaving him trembling on the brink of transformation. The dust in the attic settled like a heavy cloud around Jake as he descended the creaky wooden steps with the shield cradled against his chest. Each step resonated with the weight of realization. He could no longer ignore the hollowness of his life, nor the choices that led him there. The shield felt alive with potential, an emblem of a legacy he was now compelled to redefine. In the comfort of his sleek office overlooking the city skyline, Jake felt an unsettling contrast between his achievements and the turmoil brewing within. He sat at his polished mahogany desk, staring blankly at the bustling streets below, where lives intersected in ways he had long overlooked. Diving into spreadsheets and balance sheets had become ritualistic, yet now they felt like shackles. His role as CEO was not just about profit margins. It was a fundamental responsibility towards people, their stories interwoven with sacrifice and struggle. Deciding to act became imperative. He began sketching a plan, one that would address the mounting neglect of veterans in the corporate sector. The thought of bringing change behind glass walls ignited a flicker of hope. Yet, as anticipation buzzed, so did doubt. What would his board think? What repercussions awaited him for prioritizing ethics over profits? The thrill of confrontation flashed through his mind, igniting a cautious ambition. He pictured himself storming into the next board meeting, shield in hand, demanding an initiative dedicated to veteran welfare. But contemplation begot paralysis. Should he gamble his entire empire for moral rectitude? The whispers of his past filled his mind, memories of choices paved by sheer ambition. Isolation, the cold night that had accompanied his climb to wealth, now whispered a different kind of loneliness, one of barriers between him and those who fought for freedom. He set aside his draft, frustration molding into determination. The letters he discovered spoke of resolve and sacrifice. If his father found courage in the darkest places, then it was time Jake confronted his own fears. He booked a meeting with his executive team, a mixture of anxiety and excitement coursing through his veins. In the conference room, flanked by executives, Jake rehearsed his speech, grounding himself in the resolve his father's sacrifices demanded. Each face looked back at him with varying degrees of skepticism and apathy. Technology had hardened them. They were numbers-driven, passionless. For too long he had been one of them, dotting I's and crossing T's while ignoring the essence of humanity. Despite the initial hesitations, Jake unleashed his proposal, each word shaping the vision he had for a new direction. "We have a responsibility," he began, conviction lacing his tone, "to support our veterans and to show them that they matter beyond their service." His heart raced with every syllable, igniting a spark within the room. But the pushback was immediate and biting. "Jake, this isn't the right time for a social initiative. We need to focus on our profits, not charity." The dismissal stung. As faces hardened at the mention of reallocating resources, he felt the weight of the shield heavy in his mind. A visible token of the sacrifice his father made. The atmosphere thickened, conflict rising. Would he rise to the challenge or shrink back into the shadows of corporate indifference? The struggle within grew fierce. Defending an ideology against entrenched corporate norms felt both monumental and personal. Their doubts echoed his inner turmoil, shaking his resolve. Yet, now that he had uncovered a flicker of honesty in himself, it demanded to be illuminated. Jake felt the space around him swell with potential. The truth of his father's legacy fueled an internal fire, forcing him to confront whether he was willing to lose everything for something greater. The meeting shifted, tension hanging like a live wire. With every challenge thrown his way, Jake felt something stir within, a call to fight, an awakening in the face of opposition. The moment of action loomed closer, and realizing he had the power to implement change made him electrified and terrified all at once. The question now isn't whether he could act, but rather, will he have the courage to step onto a path that risks everything? The stakes had never been higher, but as he looked within, he sensed an unstoppable determination beginning to form. Would he embrace it, or would he allow fear to dictate his choices, shackling him to his past? Jake stood at the head of the conference table, acutely aware of the weight of his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. The room was charged, the air thick with unspoken dissent. And yet, it was within that very tension he found a kernel of strength. His hand tightened around the edges of the shield, its mere presence a constant reminder of the legacy he had inherited and now felt compelled to honor. He had laid out the initiative clearly, a commitment to hire veterans, support their transition into civilian life, and, most importantly, create a culture that acknowledged their sacrifices beyond the boardroom chatter. As he spoke, he looked each executive in the eye, searching for even a hint of empathy, but finding only hardened stares. "Jake, you can't be serious," Clara, his old confidant from finance, interjected. "Our shareholders won't buy this. We have quarterly targets to meet. You risk alienating our investors with a charity case." Her words punctured the fragile hope he had cultivated. Yet something flickered within him, an urgency unlike anything he had felt in years. "Why not look at it differently?" he countered, uncharacteristically bold. "Investing in our veterans is not charity. It's an investment in talent that can bring innovation to our company, loyalty from our workforce, and a profound sense of community that can only enhance our public image." The room shifted slightly. Maybe he was beginning to crack the surface of their indifference. But with every step forward, he felt the heavy chains of doubt pulling him back. The quiet disdain in some faces was overpowering, an unwelcome reflection of his own fears. Were they correct? Was he jeopardizing everything he had built? It was a specter that lingered, whispering insidiously in his mind. The words of his father resonated in his thoughts. "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." With each passing second, Jake realized that this was the moment, his moment. He couldn't shrug off the enormity of the undertaking, nor could he pretend this was easy, but the resolve growing within him urged him onward. "Why not look at it differently?" he countered, uncharacteristically bold. "Investing in our veterans is not charity. It's an investment in talent that can bring innovation to our company, loyalty from our workforce, and a profound sense of community that can only enhance our public image." The room shifted slightly. Maybe he was beginning to crack the surface of their indifference. But with every step forward, he felt the heavy chains of doubt pulling him back. The quiet disdain in some faces was overpowering, an unwelcome reflection of his own fears. Were they correct? Was he jeopardizing everything he had built? It was a specter that lingered, whispering insidiously in his mind. The words of his father resonated in his thoughts. "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." With each passing second, Jake realized that this was the moment, his moment. He couldn't shrug off the enormity of the undertaking, nor could he pretend this was easy, but the resolve growing within him urged him onward. Imagine a campaign that can align our brand with the valor that veterans embody. It can reshape public perception. We have the potential to lead the industry, to set a precedent for corporate responsibility. He paused, contemplating the window of opportunity before him. And what if we called it Project Valor? A chance to not only give back, but set an example of how a corporation can lead with purpose. The name slipped from his mouth almost unknowingly, yet it crackled with promise. Clara's eyes narrowed as she processed the pivot, skepticism battling with intrigue. Some executives leaned back in their chairs, brows furrowing as possibilities danced through their minds, their defenses momentarily cracked. The reluctance of his peers, however, reminded him of the pervasive corporate culture he had long been a part of. A part of him wanted to revert back, to scuttle this audacious plan for safety and comfort. But did he really want to reduce his vision to mere numbers and piles of gold? In a world that demands authenticity, are we really going to fall back on excuses? He challenged them, embracing a steely conviction. We have a chance to redefine our legacy, to create not just wealth, but purpose. Let's not operate out of fear. The silence stretched, a fragile bridge of uncertainty wavering in the room. Each second felt monumental, yet Jake stood resolute. His father's shield, metaphorical yet present, imbuing him with a sense of purpose. Slowly, he saw it, the glimmer of recognition in the eyes of his colleagues. Doubt was beginning to shift, ever so slightly, to curiosity. Perhaps this was more than an aspiration. Perhaps they could be part of something that shifted the very landscape of their industry. "Okay, let's set up a task force," Clara conceded, her tone softening with reluctant acceptance. "But we need data. We want to know whether this will resonate with our shareholders." Jake nodded, a surge of relief washing over him. He was now at a precipice of potential, Yet, beyond the laughter of victory lay new challenges. In that moment of tentative compromise, Jake recognized he was merely setting the stage for greater struggles that would require an even deeper dive into his own self-awareness and capabilities. As he left the room, exhilaration coursing through him, one question loomed larger than ever. How far was he willing to push against the tide of corporate resistance to drive this initiative forward? This was only the beginning, and he felt the pulse of a growing revolution stirring in his chest. The fight was far from over, and the real battle was just taking shape. With the shield now a part of his identity, Jake leaned into the dawning realization. Confronting his own fears would not only define his future, but also those lives intertwined with his mission. The time had come to face the deeper forces arrayed against him, ready or not. The glow of the conference room bleached away as Jake stepped into the corridor, the weight of the shield pressing against him more tangibly than ever. He took a deep breath, his mind racing with the implications of their tentative agreement. Data, quantifiable metrics that would persuade investors. A core principle of corporate decision-making, but a far cry from the passionate plea he had just made. What would it take to transform abstract convictions into numbers? As he navigated the bustling office, he sensed that this was not just a challenge of numbers, but a test of vision, a recalibration of priorities, his and the company's. In the stark fluorescent lighting, Jake resolved to dig deeper, to unearth compelling narratives that could sway the shareholder base. Sitting at his desk, he opened his laptop, the screen illuminating his determined features. He began to brainstorm potential metrics that could validate the emotional appeal of Project Valor. Employee satisfaction, talent retention rates, community engagement statistics, these were all avenues that could draw a clearer, data-driven picture. Yet a more pressing question throbbed beneath the surface. How could he convey the emotional significance of veterans' contributions without reducing their experiences to mere figures? His fingers hovered over the keyboard as thoughts collided. He contemplated reaching out to veterans organizations to gather testimonials. Real stories could bridge the gap between the metrics and the mission. But as that thought crystallized, another wave of doubt washed over him. How could he ensure those testimonials? Would voices not be misrepresented, transformed into a marketing gimmick? This required a delicate approach, a mutual alliance rooted in respect. Jake, the smooth voice of Sam, his operations manager, startled him out of his reverie. "I need to talk to you about resources for the task force. We're already stretched thin." "Can you give me a moment?" Jake responded, his tone clipped. He needed time to think, to formulate a vision that was both ambitious and digestible to the skeptics. As Sam retreated, Jake realized he was spiraling into the tense space between ambition and pragmatism. With fewer resources at hand and higher expectations on the horizon, he refused to compromise on the integrity of Project Valor. As the days melted into nights, Jake immersed himself in research, navigating through countless reports and articles. He engaged with veterans groups, gathering stories that reflected their resilience, entrepreneurial spirit, and skills. The more he listened, the more vibrant a parallel narrative emerged, a narrative steeped in purpose. But every time he prepared to present this evolving vision to his colleagues, shadows of doubt loomed larger. He occasionally glanced at the marker board, now filled with colorful diagrams and bullet points, each one underscoring his commitment to authenticity. Yet the memory of Clara's piercing criticism echoed in his mind. Was he risking his career for a noble quest, or was this initiative really going to propel their brand into an era of genuine social awareness? Halfway through a sleepless night, a sudden realization coursed through him. He had forgotten one crucial element in this equation: communication. It wasn't enough to compile data or build strategies. He needed a campaign that resonated at a human level, crafted not only for shareholders, but for every individual who would stand by his side in this journey. Armed with this new understanding, Jake set his sights on the next board meeting, honing not only his statistics, but also the emotional core of his message. Could he intertwine both data and narrative into a new vision that would command attention? A renewed fervor surged within him. This was his moment, not just to advocate for veterans, but to redefine what leadership meant in their company. He knew now that the shield wasn't just a symbol of his past. It was a catalyst propelling him toward a purpose he could barely begin to chart. But as the day of presentation approached, uncertainty loomed larger than ever. Would his colleagues embrace this vision, or would they continue to tether themselves to corporate conventions? The answer remained just beyond his grasp, laden with potential, yet fraught with peril. In the silent shadows of the conference room, he rehearsed his message, questioning if he had truly transformed. The stakes had never felt higher. Would courage continue to illuminate his path, or would the whisper of fear dim the light? The hour of reckoning was near, and Jake understood that with it, more than just his initiative would be at risk. So too would his very essence as a leader. As Jake stood in front of his bathroom mirror, glaring at his own reflection, he felt an ominous tension coiling in his chest. The sleek black suit he wore, hand-picked for the meeting, felt more like an armor than attire. A heavy costume stitched with expectations and fear. He practiced his opening lines aloud, but each word felt brittle, as if the sincerity of his intentions might shatter at any moment. He had cobbled together what felt like a fragile fortress of logic and emotion, but doubt crept in, insidious in its design. Steam from his morning shower lingered in the air, blurring the sharp lines of the bathroom. Jake wiped the mirror clean, his image becoming sharper, brutally clear. He wasn't just presenting a proposal, he was laying his heart on the chopping block. Each statistic, each veteran's story he planned to share, was a fragment of himself, splintered hopes mixing with the fear of failure. Arriving at the office, he reveled in the familiar buzz, yet the energy seemed tainted. Colleagues filed past, immersed in their own realities, unaware of the bubbling storm within him. He caught snippets of whispered conversations about quarterly earnings and market projections, all trivial compared to what awaited him in the conference room. He entered his office, locking the door behind him, desperate for isolation to hold on to his resolve. Jake sat down, his fingers tapping nervously against the desk. Was he prepared, truly? The narrative he had woven around Project Valor pulsed with potential, but teetered on the edge of fragility. He nestled his laptop open, scanning the testimonials and stories he'd gathered. Each voice captured the essence of sacrifice. It's what made them human. And yet, how would it resonate in a boardroom that thrived on numbers? He clutched a slip of paper, a quote from a veteran about the power of purpose. It anchored him, reminding him why he started this journey. Yet a furious cycle of self-doubt loomed overhead. Jake! The door creaked open, and Sam's face peered in, concern etched upon it. Are you ready? They're waiting. The words slammed into him. I'm almost there, he forced out, the uncertainty trembling in his voice. Sam's brow furrowed. You've got this, remember? Just tell them what matters. Jake nodded, yet he felt a flicker of resentment. Sam's faith, while well-intended, felt like the pressure of a crowd at a high-stakes performance. He needed clarity, not platitudes. The short walk down the corridor to the conference room was a descent into the unknown. As he stepped into the room, the polished table gleamed under the harsh lights, and the faces of his colleagues turned toward him, expectation carved into their features. Was that skepticism he saw in Clara's eyes, or was it merely the reflection of his own anxiety? Taking a deep breath, Jake launched into his presentation. He danced between the emotional narratives and the hard metrics, feeling the sway of the room. Each number represents not just a statistic, but a human life, a commitment to something beyond ourselves. He recounted stories of veterans, their struggles, their achievements. The words started to flow, imbued with a fervor that jarred him awake. But as the presentation progressed, he noticed Clara's raised eyebrow, a subtle skepticism that upended his appeal. Her voice sliced through his momentum. "But Jake, can stories really replace the solid promise of profitability? What if this becomes a distraction?" Her question reverberated through the room. The air grew thicker, the edges of his vision darkening slightly. "I believe that the investments we make into people, not just profits, create a sustainable future," he countered, the pulse of his heart matching the urgency in his voice. As he battled against the tide of doubt and criticism, Jake felt an unexpected clarity wash over him. This was about more than just Project Valor. It was a reflection of who he was becoming. He was no longer simply a cog in the corporate machine. He was a curator of narratives, holding the potential to influence change not just for the company, but for himself as well. The meeting clicked into a reckless rhythm, arguments and counters bouncing across the polished table. And amidst this clash, Jake grasped an unsettling certainty. He was redefining his own leadership, not just through advocacy, but through resilience. But as the minutes ticked away, a nagging question lingered in the back of Jake's mind. How far was he willing to push for something that could very well fracture his career? Would the battle for authenticity in his message burn the very bridges he sought to build? Jake's resolve began crystallizing in an undeniable truth. To embrace his vision fully meant standing firm in the face of opposition. The stakes had never felt higher, yet the anticipation of the unfolding drama felt electric. As he concluded, the atmosphere in the room hung heavy with uncertainty. The board's response loomed just out of reach, a potent mix of possibility and peril. Jake was teetering on the edge of a cliff, and below him, the abyss of doubt waited eagerly. What awaited him next? A vote of confidence or a descent into corporate disillusionment? The moment of truth was imminent, and with it, the defining choice of his journey lay in front of him. The silence that followed Jake's words felt suffocating, an elastic pause stretching in every direction. He fought the instinct to fill it with nervous chatter. There were decisions to be made, and they were not his alone. The board members exchanged glances, calculating, evaluating. Clara's skeptical gaze bore into him like a laser, each blink amplifying his need for affirmation. When the quiet broke, it was Tom who spoke first, his tone measured yet questioning. "Jake, your passion is evident, but how does Project Valor fit into our long-term financial strategy? We are a business first." His words were precise, surgical. They cut through the emotional layers, and Jake felt a wave of frustration boiling within. "That's precisely it," he replied, a bit more forcefully than he intended. "Investing in veterans isn't just philanthropy. It's about tapping into an underutilized talent pool. The outcomes will be visible in productivity. High morale equals profit. It's not an either-or, it's a synergistic approach." Jake looked around the room, keenly aware of the shifting dynamics. Some faces showed intrigue, others remained skeptical. He took in their expressions, slowly understanding the nuances of his audience. Every word, every gesture counted. He needed to turn their doubt into understanding, their skepticism into support. "This isn't just a project, it's a narrative we can carry into our company culture," he pressed on, emboldened by a desire to transcend the metrics. "People connect with stories. When we offer veterans a chance to thrive, we also align our brand with resilience, compassion, and authenticity. Those values resonate with our clients and partners." The edge of Clara's lips curled up slightly, but her brow held firm. "Values don't pay the bills, Jake. They might attract attention in the short term, but that's not enough in this industry. This could potentially divert resources rather than enhance them." Jake swallowed hard, feeling the enormity of her challenge. This was not just about advocating for veterans anymore. It was turning into a test of his conviction and professional prowess. Did he genuinely believe in his analysis? Did he have what it took to defend it? He had to tease apart the emotions from the realities of business to clarify his position. I understand the implications, and yes, values must align with profitability. But sometimes the most sustainable profits emerge from unexpected avenues. Project Valor offers that route. We have the chance to make an impact, not just financially, but ethically. We can redefine what success looks like, he argued, his voice gaining strength. In that moment, a flicker of understanding ignited in him, a realization that authentic leadership involved taking calculated risks, especially when fueled by genuine conviction. He scrutinized the expressions of the board members, gauging the weight of his words against their realities. He had been seeking validation from them, but it was time to let his assertion take center stage. As the discussion shifted and murmurs swirled, Jake embraced an unfamiliar sensation. It was a subtle ferocity growing within, a whisper of certainty that demanded attention. He wanted to believe in this vision, yet doubt and ambition waged war inside him. Then it happened. A wave of rising confidence enveloped him. It was one thing to champion a cause, quite another to embody authority while doing so. He was not just triggering numbers. He was advocating for dignity and purpose, and that in itself fostered a value that could pivot commercial success. Beneath the fervent debate, Jake contemplated the fragility of his aspirations. It was an awakening of sorts, the potential for development intertwined with professional risk. The fear of alienation from his colleagues loomed. Could he remain steadfastly authentic while navigating an environment predominantly driven by profit? Jake's heart thrummed, rhythm with the dialogue, sparking a new determination. He stared down Clara, a subtle challenge simmering under the surface. If we fail to invest in real human stories, then what are we really worth as a company? What's the legacy we're building? The silence settled back in, thicker and more introspective. Jake felt it now, a shift of momentum, teetering on the edge of a revelation that could redefine not just his project, but his career. As he prepared for their responses, he realized this meeting held keys to his evolution, not merely a corporate lay of the land, but a mirror reflecting his potential. How would he masterfully navigate through these murky waters of doubt and indifference? Jake stood poised, wondering what lay at the precipice of this confrontation. A breakthrough or disillusionment that might shake the very foundation of his career ambitions. The answer loomed ahead, and once again he was left guessing at his fate. The tension in the boardroom clung to him like a second skin. Jake's heart raced, and with each passing moment of expectation, he felt the weight of his aspiration bearing down. Unsure if he had even crossed a threshold of acceptance or ascended into outright opposition, he scanned the board members for clarity. Suddenly, the stakes felt personal. This was not merely about Project Valor, but about his identity and purpose within the corporate structure. Amid the murmurs, Clara remained expressionless, her gaze impenetrable. He grappled with the unease, a familiar sense of vulnerability flirting with his confidence. This was a critical inflection point. He sensed that the outcome of this discussion could govern his trajectory, fundamentally altering his career and self-perception. The more he reflected on it, the clearer it became. Every word could seal his fate. He had entered this meeting striving for affirmation, but he now understood that what he sought was much deeper, an acceptance of his vision and, by extension, himself. Yet, standing there, he realized he had positioned himself not just as a team member, but as a potential leader. The thought ignited a fervor within him. Leadership was not only about charisma or authority, but about authenticity. It demanded not just the ability to persuade, but to connect with others on a fundamental level. How could he inspire them to see the value he saw? In that instant, Jake decided he would not shrink. He would speak even louder for the silent voices he wanted to uplift. "Consider this," he said, injecting a newfound urgency into his tone. "What if we are too focused on immediate deliverables? If we can reshape our environment to be more inclusive and supportive of veterans, it's not just a moral obligation, it's a strategic advantage. We generate not just profit, but resilience, an asset that could buffer us against fluctuating market demands. Resilient employees foster loyalty and innovate for longer." He leaned forward, intertwining hope with strategy. As the energy shifted slightly, Jake noticed subtle nods, even from Tom, who had initially challenged him. The glimmers of interest in the room felt like an ember, something he could fan into a flame. Questions had morphed into possibilities, opportunities for dialogue. "You stress the narrative aspect, Jake." Clara's voice sliced through the reverie, sharp but thoughtful. "But have you considered how that narrative aligns with our current branding and operational goals? Integrating this into an already established framework can pose challenges." Jake took a deep breath. "Absolutely, Clara. The integration isn't simple. It requires dissecting our current processes and perhaps even stepping outside our comfort zones. However, that's where growth lies. Resisting the change stifles our potential. Taking that leap isn't merely about adding another program, it's about redefining our approach to inclusivity." As he spoke, the surrounding atmosphere morphed, revealing a newfound perspective alignment. He was no longer merely defending an idea, he was advocating for a holistic transformation, questioning not only how the company positioned itself in the marketplace, but also how it defined its very core. His mind raced ahead, envisioning sessions filled with collaboration, creativity, and growth, a culture that celebrated human stories rather than solely profit margins. This shift felt almost liberating, albeit daunting. He wondered how many of his colleagues longed for such a change but feared voicing it. Did they too share his vision, yet lacked the courage to advocate for it? The thought planted seeds of resolve within him. Jake understood personal integrity often came at a cost. He might face pushback, not just in this meeting, but down the line. But he felt strong enough to shoulder it, ready to rise in the name of purpose. "Together," he implored, "we can transform this project into a catalyst, not just for our company, but for hundreds of veterans seeking a meaningful second chance." The interlacing of his ambition with theirs ignited hope. But as he scanned the board one last time, searching for any signs of conviction, uncertainty flickered again in Clara's eyes. As she opened her mouth to speak, Jake sensed the energy in the room shift back to a simmer of contemplation. He held his breath, anxious to see if they would rally behind him or if they would retreat back to safety, stifling potential in favor of status quo. For Jake, this moment could birth his evolution, or it could expose his naivety. Could he transform doubt into belief? The answer felt imminent, balancing precariously on the horizon. Yet, underneath it all, loomed a new fear. What if he was ready to step forward, but they weren't willing to follow? Just as Clara began to form her response, the door swung open unexpectedly, revealing a new figure poised to enter, a startling interruption that could shift the entire conversation. Jake's pulse quickened as the figure stepped into the boardroom. It was Ian Graves, a billionaire known for his unyielding business acumen and bold decisions. Ian was not just any newcomer. He was an industry titan, the very embodiment of ambition and success, and his presence sent ripples of unease through the board members. Jake felt a mix of excitement and terror. This was a pivotal moment that could alter everything. "Apologies for interrupting," Ian said, his voice smooth yet commanding. "I couldn't help but overhear your discussion about Project Valor." Every eye turned to Jake, and he felt the weight of their scrutiny shift upon him. He was about to speak, to reframe his argument, when Ian raised a hand and continued. "I've been following this project closely. More than just another initiative, it's a testament to our core values. I want to hear more about the vision behind it, Jake. The request rattled him. The concept of sharing his vision with this power broker felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Could he articulate the deeper purpose that was swirling in his mind? His mind raced. This was not merely a corporate proposition. It was about championing voices that often went unheard. Thank you, Ian. Project Valor is about crafting a narrative for veterans in the workplace. It's about recognizing their unique experiences and leveraging that resilience for our growth as a company. As Jake spoke, he sensed the room leaned in, anticipation rippling through the air. Ivan's presence opened doors, allowing Jake's words to resonate with a gravity they hadn't before. We can redefine our operational culture by fostering environments that celebrate personal stories and utilize those experiences as strategic assets. Ian nodded slowly, his expression contemplative. Interesting perspective, but how do you plan to navigate the operational challenges in implementing this? Jake paused, the spotlight now firmly on him, illuminating all his uncertainties. By committing to a comprehensive plan that involves not only the leadership team, but also creating paths for employees at every level to contribute. It's about sparking a revolution of thought within our team, ensuring everyone feels invested in the future. He felt an undercurrent of power in his voice, a realization that he was no longer simply defending an idea. He was galvanizing change. Silence hung in the air, punctuated only by the soft murmurs of board members exchanging glances. Clara's eyes bore into him, filled with something he couldn't quite decipher. It dawned on him. This opportunity wasn't just for the project. This was about establishing himself, stepping into a role that had eluded him. As his confidence grew, so did his ambition. Did the board see him as a leader now? The stakes were no longer just about acceptance. They were about claiming a space in this corporate ecosystem where authenticity triumphed over mere financial success. The thought injected vigor into every word he spoke. I propose a pilot program, one that combines mentorship, workshops, and access to resources specifically tailored for veterans. We can showcase success stories to both inspire and measure impact. I want this to be a collaborative effort driven by data and human connection. Ian leaned forward, intrigued. What's your timeline? Jake hesitated momentarily, but pushed through the doubt. If we could initiate this within the next quarter, we'd have enough time to refine our approach while integrating it into our current objectives. Ambitious, Ian replied, an approving glimmer in his eye. That's the kind of mentality we need, but how will you ensure that the momentum doesn't falter? Jake took a deep breath, the realization settling like a mantle on his shoulders. I will lead, but I can't do this alone. I need the board's collective support, each of you to champion this initiative within your departments. Together, we can create a culture shift across the organization. As he finished, he could see the board members mulling over his proposition. They were digesting not just the proposal, but the man standing before them. Could this new trajectory also pave the way for his self-assertion, achieving not just professional growth, but personal fulfillment? Yet, beneath his invigorated ambition simmered a new anxiety. What if his vision faced resistance from within? What if he buckled under pressure? Their faces betrayed no overt judgment, but Jake felt claws of uncertainty scrape at the edges of his newfound confidence. Before he could confront those doubts further, a voice emerged from the back of the room. "What makes you think it can really work, Jake? Have you considered the pushback?" The challenge rattled through the air like an electric charge, and Jake's stomach nodded instinctively. The irony was unmistakable. The journey toward authenticity was brightly lit up ahead, but the path was far from clear. He now stood at a crossroads, ready, or perhaps not, to seize the moment. The stakes were rising even higher, and as he looked around, he questioned whether he was ready for the reality of what he had ignited. And just like that, a new fear coalesced in the depths of his thoughts. Was he prepared to confront the inevitable backlash to come? Or could he steer this ship into uncharted waters? Jake's heart raced at the challenge. The boardroom, once filled with potential, suddenly felt like a cage where every word could imprison him further in doubt. The voice challenging him belonged to Carl, a senior executive known for his unyielding critique. If one person could sway the board against him, it was Carl. Swallowing hard, Jake drew upon his earlier resolve. I believe Project Valor isn't just a nice-to-have, it's a necessity. Companies that adapt and embrace the diverse narratives of their workforce outperform those that don't. The conviction in his words surprised him, yet he felt the weight of Carl's skepticism linger like the scent of stale coffee in the room. A noble goal, Carl replied, his tone dripping with skepticism. But have you really thought about how you will engage those veterans? What if they resist opening up? What's at stake after all? Every word from Carl felt like nails scraping down a chalkboard, invoking a primal urge to retreat. Yet the fire within him was ignited. Then it's my responsibility to create an environment where they feel safe to share. We need to show that vulnerability is a strength, especially in business. If we can cultivate resilience within our team, we can overcome any pushback we face. Ian interjected. Interesting. But talk is cheap, Jake. What are the tangible benefits? Show me the metrics that can prove this approach is worthy of investment. There it was. His proposal needed to transcend idealism and evolve into reality. Jake took a moment, mentally shifting the ground beneath his feet. He gathered his data, pulled from studies that had documented how inclusion improved workplace morale and productivity. Studies show that companies with diverse leadership teams can see profits increase by 19%. We can harness the stories and skills of veterans to drive innovations and strategies that align with consumer values, ultimately boosting profitability. Nods from some board members boosted his morale, yet self-doubt crept in. He felt adrift, realizing he was only as strong as the belief the board placed in him. Was he truly equipped to lead this charge? What if they decided to side with caution and reject his vision as merely idealistic? Your arguments are compelling, but one project won't change the culture overnight. Clara piped in, her voice a crash of waves against his resolve. We need buy-in from both employees and leadership. Have you drafted a concrete plan to ensure everyone is on board? Losing ground was not an option. Yes, I have. I envision a structure with a steering committee made of veterans and allies who can spearhead efforts and address concerns as they arise. Regular feedback sessions will ensure we stay unified and adaptive. He felt the ambiguity of leadership deeply, the need to directly shape thoughts and actions without knowing if anyone would embrace them. The tension in the room thickened. Each board member wore a mask of contemplation, weighing risks against potential. Jake realized that beyond the struggle for approval, he was also grappling with his own apprehensions about the legacy he wanted to forge. As the meeting began to wind down, Ian's unwavering gaze connected with him. You're showing promise, Jake, but remember, every initiative goes through a phase of pain before the gain. It's up to you to remain steadfast. Would he collapse under the weight of the pain, or would he rise? Jake's pulse echoed the duality of choices rippling in his mind. With the board members beginning to voice their thoughts, he sensed that the tide had turned. He had planted the seeds of change. Yet even as optimism tugged at his heart, a deeper anxiety stirred within him. Would he stand tall amidst the inevitable conflict ahead, or would he wither against the onslaught of doubt? As the discussion veered toward next steps, Jake suddenly understood something pivotal about himself. The battle would be internal as much as external. Defending his vision meant confronting not just the board's skepticism, but also his self-doubt. As he left the boardroom, clarity emerged amidst the complexity. In his quest for authenticity, he must also fortify his mindset. What if the obstacles ahead mirrored the shadows he had resisted facing within himself? What latent fears could emerge as the real challenges unfolded, testing his resolve in unprecedented ways? The coming days would demand not just professional resilience, but an exploration of Jake's hidden vulnerabilities. Could he embrace those, or would they fracture the foundations he was building? The following days unfolded like a turbulent sea, each wave crashing against Jake's steadfast resolve. During conference calls, discussions shifted from skepticism to guarded enthusiasm. The board, previously indifferent, revealed glimpses of curiosity. Yet beneath this veneer of optimism, Jake felt turbulence brewing. The challenge was no longer solely about Project Valor. It was also about redefining his own identity, both as a leader and as a man shaped by a legacy. Each morning as he stood before the mirror, the reflection revealed a man evolving under pressure. He learned to embrace the vulnerability he previously hid from. He began openly discussing his fears with Sam and other trusted colleagues, recognizing that transparency invited camaraderie rather than isolation. It was a departure from the sterling facade he had worn, revealing that leadership was about authenticity, not just authority. With the pilot program underway, Jake rolled up his sleeves, immersing himself in the intricacies of veteran engagement. He orchestrated focus groups, inviting veterans to share their stories and aspirations. The more he listened, the more he understood that inherent in each narrative was a reservoir of strength, untapped potential waiting to be harnessed. It solidified his belief. Project Valor wasn't just a corporate initiative, it was a movement, one that demanded genuine connection and deep empathy. As weeks passed, he found himself not just driving the project's vision, but cultivating a new culture of recognition within the company. Morale surged as employees, veteran and non-veteran alike, found empowerment in shared goals. Whether it was through training programs or mentorship opportunities, Jake witnessed the revitalizing effect of dignity bestowed upon those who had served. The stories became tangible. Positive testimonials emerged, modeling resilience that translated into productivity and innovation. But not everyone was aboard the ship. Clara's opposition lingered like thick fog, and Carl continued voicing doubts that clawed at his resolve. During a particularly combative meeting, Clara questioned the project's viability yet again. "It's wonderful in theory, Jake, but where are the numbers? What are the real financial implications?" Rather than buckle, Jake's dedication had solidified. His response was swift and unyielding. "I fully acknowledge the risks, but I have also seen our momentum shift. Our employee satisfaction ratings have risen, and productivity among departments actively engaged with veterans is on the rise. This isn't just about numbers, Clara. This is a strategic investment." That meeting marked a turning point. Clara's skepticism could no longer overshadow the data-driven successes they had started to see. Those in the room began to recognize that Jake's vision was becoming a reality. The emotional charge, acting as an undercurrent, had transmuted into palpable results. The internal transformation Jake experienced reflected in the company's pulse. It was revitalized, stoked by purpose and direction. Metrics began justifying his emotional appeals as the more conventional board members became intrigued by this new integration of purpose and profitability. Their initial pushback morphed into support, highlighting an unexpected shift in corporate culture. One fateful afternoon, Jake found himself in a meeting with Ian. When the billionaire offered his endorsement of Project Valor publicly at a major industry conference, positioning Jake as a champion, tears prickled at the edges of his eyes. This recognition transcended mere validation. Ian's backing solidified Jake's trajectory towards becoming a trendsetter, not just within the walls of his firm, but in the broader business community. Victory, however, was never without its price. Clara remained persistent, probing into potential pitfalls at every turn. During a meeting, she laid out her concerns about a backlash from investors who demanded lower operational costs. "You've made strides, but protecting our bottom line remains non-negotiable. What then?" Jake felt the familiar tension fill the room, but this time a sense of unwavering confidence coursed through him. "We can protect our bottom line while upholding our values. This is not just an investment in our company, it is an investment in our society. When we authentically support our veterans, we build a brand that resonates with consumers, fosters loyalty, and strengthens our market position." The echoing silence that followed was not a void of dissent, it was a pause of contemplation. In the weeks that followed, Clara began to soften, her challenges evolving toward constructive guidance. With the board increasingly unified and aligned, Jake saw glimmers of something transformative. He had awakened camaraderie, shifting focus from individual territories to shared victories, wholly capturing the essence of leadership. Jake Mercer had emerged from the cocoon of ambition that had once defined him. He was now a leader grounded in purpose, one who understood the critical balance between heart and strategy. He no longer stood at the precipice of fear, but within the embrace of his authentic self. As the perfect storm of personal and professional convergence settled, Jake stood once again at the head of the conference room. The boardroom, once a rigid space of corporate maneuvering, became a canvas where intention would flourish into substantive growth, far beyond mere monetary gains. In that moment, Jake understood his journey was only beginning. The shield he once clutched so tightly was now a symbol of his commitment to transform lives. And while the tangible achievements were innumerable, it was the growth within that anchored him. He had conquered the vast chasm of doubt and emerged not just as a CEO, but as a beacon of hope for the veterans he vowed to uplift. It was his father's legacy, fighting not just for freedom, but also for humanity, integrity, and purpose that propelled him into this new chapter. And with that realization, Jake knew that in every intention, every plan, and every story shared, he was cementing his legacy, not just with a shield, but with a profound promise to honor
those who had sacrificed so much. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of these actions.